Kimi K3 promises frontier coding at half the price, but one number decides whether that discount is real.
At this World AI conference in Shanghai, I went to Kimi's booth, Moonshot AI's booth. That's the Chinese startup that was behind the new Kimi K3 model. They just launched that model. It is the largest ever in China, 2.8 trillion parameters. And the company says that it outperforms all rivals except for Anthropic's latest Fable 5, as well as OpenAI's ChatGPT.
Moonshot's own leaderboard is one thing. What independent developers actually got out of K3 is another. Start with where reviewers agree it shines.
It actually beat the frontier. This is Arena AI's front-end development benchmark. And what do we see? Kimi K3 at the top, above Fable 5, above GPT 5.6. That means in front-end development, Kimi K3 is the best model on the planet right now. And that is wild. And by the way, it's not by a small margin. Here it is, 76% versus number 2, Fable 5 at 60.
A front-end benchmark win only helps if the model stays fast under load. Speed is where K3's architecture makes its second case.
The experts in score. Okay, the next component we'll get into for Kimi K3 is this bottom left section of the diagram. And this is really the meat and bone when it comes to why Kimi K3 is such a beautifully crafted model. This section right here is what helped contribute Kimi K3 to maintain 6-time decoding throughputs while also scoring higher than the status quo without sacrificing.
Throughput and benchmarks are lab numbers. 2 reviewers put K3 on real builds to see what that speed buys a working developer.
So Kimi took 6.6 million tokens with a 98% cache rate. Fable was at 11.5 million with a 96% cache rate. Kimi took 51 minutes. Fable took a little over an hour at an hour 17 minutes. And holy moly, that is cheap. $3.75. That is exactly
90% of Fables result for a fraction of the cost sounds decisive, but that pricing catch is still ahead. First, a second build.
Opponents who are genuinely difficult to fight. It's pretty even, guys. Fables does look better, but again, speed, it was half the amount of time as Fable. It cost 1/10 the amount of Fable, and the output was like 80 to 90% there. I will give the output to Fable because, it does have sound.
Both builds landed near Fable's quality at a sliver of the price. That raw price, though, isn't the number that actually matters.
So much gain in the US, even looking at just how much more advanced we are in chip and the infrastructure layer to unleash the model potentially at a faster or potentially cheaper inference than their current pricing at $3 per million input token and $15 per million output tokens. I'm also really curious to see how this number might look.
$3 in, 15 out reads cheap against frontier rates. The sticker price, however, hides how many tokens each task really burns.
The right it is, the better. Now, what we're seeing here is Kimi K3 Max sits right there, right under GPT 5.6 Soul. However, it's effectively the same price. They're both about $4.70. Now, what does that actually mean? That means Kimi K3, given that it is half the price, takes twice the amount of tokens for the same exact task. And the number one model on this right now is...
So the per token discount evaporates at the invoice. Theo pushes it further, arguing a similarly priced rival could be the smarter buy.
That's genuinely exciting because open weight models have not been good at this historically. But if your goal is to use this model to save a bunch of money, you probably shouldn't be too excited yet because that $15 out cost is not cheap. And since it uses twice as many tokens as something like Sol, cancels out the 50% discount that you're getting, and you also lose a lot of the niceties that you get from modern frontier labs. Moonshot themselves even said that the model still has a noticeable gap in user experience compared with Fable 5 and 5.6 Sol.
Cost aside, there's a reliability question no discount can fix. Fireship's benchmark read is where the caveats get serious.
competitive with the other frontier models. But you should never trust the Trust Me Bro benchmarks, because many of the K3 numbers were produced with Moonshot's own Kimi code harness, while competitors ran in different harnesses. That could make Kimi look slightly better at coding, but to their credit, Moonshot admits that K3 still trails Fable and GPT 5.6 Sol overall, especially on benchmarks like Humanity's Last Exam, where it's down by about 10 points. On top of that, artificial analysis measured a 51% hallucination rate, which is definitely not a good thing, especially when it
Buy Kimi K3 if you're a front-end or prototyping developer who values open weights and speed. Skip it for high-stakes reasoning. Its 51% hallucination rate is the deal breaker. Every clip links to the full video in the description. Go watch the originals. This is educational content, not professional advice.